On Monday, March 21st, 2022, China Eastern Flight 5735 took off from the southern Chinese city of Kunming carrying 132 passengers. And just over an hour later, it fell from the skies. Here is everything we've uncovered about the crash so far. Thank you to Brilliant for sponsoring this video. If you're looking for a fun and interactive way to learn topics in STEM, check out the link in the description. So what happened? Flight 5735 was operated by China Eastern Airlines between the city of Kunming and Guangzhou, which is a flight time of around 2 hours and 10 minutes. Now, this is a very popular route with multiple airlines offering daily flights. And in every regard, Flight 5735 was just another one of those typical flights. It took off on time at 1:11 p.m. local time, and for the next hour, everything proceeded as normal until it entered into the airspace of the city of Wuzhou. This was the same area where the day prior, the same exact flight started its descent into its destination of Guangzhou. And up until that point, there was no indication that anything had gone awry. In fact, the weather was normal, it was slightly cloudy, and there were no abnormal reporting coming from the pilots. However, at 2:22 p.m. local time, 1 hour and 10 minutes into the flight, air traffic control lost contact with the pilots and saw that the plane had began to descend rapidly. Or rather, it might be more accurate to say it started to free fall, because over the next 4 minutes, the plane would descend 26,000 feet before disappearing off of radar. It had reached a maximum speed of 157 meters per second. And flight data also shows that around the 7,400 feet mark, the plane had actually regained some altitude momentarily before rapidly descending again. And during this time, air traffic control attempted to contact the plane multiple times but received no response. Now, one redundant thing that I still want to call out here is that it is incredibly hard for planes to just free fall. Even if it does lose all of its powers and controls in flight, its natural tendency is still to glide and not just tip over. And even if it does enter into a nosedive, there are typically opportunities for the pilot to recover the aircraft, given that there is enough altitude. But that does rely on two pretty important assumptions. One is that the aircraft stays intact, and two, that it does not enter into an unrecoverable nosedive. Now, I'm not going to speculate around what might have caused the crash, so we're just gonna have to wait for the official investigation to conclude on that one. But in the meantime, let's discuss some of the other factors around this crash. Now, probably the first question on all of our minds when we heard about this is, was this the 737 MAX? Is MCAS really back at it again? And the answer to that is no. The plane that was involved was a Boeing 737-800 that's a part of their next generation or NG line. Now, these were single-aisle twin-engine aircraft that served as the predecessor to the 737 MAX. So on one hand, that's great news. The MAX has stayed accident-free since its return in 2020. But maybe the more alarming thing here is that this specific model, the -800, is one of the most widely used commercial airliners in history, with over 4,200 planes currently in service. Now, this model alone makes up for around 17% of all passenger planes in the skies today. So maybe one solace we can find here is that since their introduction back in 1990, the -800 has had an incredibly strong safety record, with just 12 fatal crashes in the span of 32 years. That means there was roughly one fatal crash for every 10 million flights on this plane. And when we take a closer look at what exactly caused those 12 crashes, a large number of them were actually due to the development of of stress fatigue in the metal after years and years of use. However, the plane that was involved in the crash this time was just delivered in 2015, making it just under 7 years old. And for a plane that's designed to last decades, that's considered a baby. And that's especially true if you consider that the typical age of a Dash 800 in service today is around 13 years old. What has also been brought up recently is the fact that regulators may have noticed a fault in the Dash 800s. Back in 2019, the FAA ordered the inspection of 737 MAX and NG planes, including the Dash 800s. Now, this was due to cracks that were found on a component called the leading edge slat tracks, was found to require more frequent replacement than was originally designed for. But this was an issue that affected a very small number of older NG planes, and it was unlikely to have affected the aircraft involved since it was still quite new. And the FAA even made sure to highlight that even complete failure of this component would not bring an aircraft down. All in all, signs are pointing away from any defect in the 737-800 themselves. And although China Eastern has decided to ground all of their fleet of that model, other airlines around the world are still continuing to operate the aircraft. Now, one thing that was out of the ordinary for this flight was its crew. Typically, short-haul flights like this one are flown by two pilots, the captain and the first officer. But in this case, there was a third pilot in the cockpit, the second officer, who was there to observe and gain experience. And not only that, the first officer on Flight 5735 was allegedly one of the most experienced commercial pilots in China, with over 30,000 flight hours. He not only trained over 100 captains for China Eastern, but had actually trained the captain on that flight. And sadly, he was planning to retire just later this year. Others have also drawn attention to the aviation safety record of China Eastern and Chinese aviation as a whole. Now, today, airlines in China are among the world's safest, but just a few decades ago, that couldn't be further from the truth. For much of the 90s, Chinese airlines were considered to be some of the most dangerous in the world, with a horrific crash record that was due to a combination of poor pilot training, improper repairs, and overall just attempts to cut corners. In fact, at its worst, there were fatal crashes happening within weeks of each other. And this became so concerning that Boeing and Airbus were worried that this would affect their reputation and the sale of their aircraft. And so they decided to set up permanent training programs in China that would offer pilots training programs as well as simulator time for free. And China was also very aware of its aviation safety problem, and so they decided to recruit the help of the FAA and Boeing to essentially rewrite its aviation regulations. And to encourage compliance, the government had actually threatened to withhold aircraft deliveries from airlines if they didn't have a good plan on how they were going to improve safety. And as a result of these changes and years of progress, China is a country with one of the best air safety records today. The last fatal crash in China happened in August of 2010 when an Embraer SA operated by Henan Airlines crashed during landing, which killed 42 of its 96 passengers. And China Eastern Airlines, which operated Flight 5735, had gone 17 years without any fatal accidents prior to Monday. So where are we today? Well, investigation is still ongoing, with help being offered by the NTSB and Boeing. And so far, we have recovered one of the two black boxes, which we know contains the cockpit voice recorder. The other box, which contains the flight data recorder, is still yet to be found. But we do know that it is equipped with a battery that will help it emit a location beacon for the next 30 days or so. Unfortunately, due to heavy rain and the mountainous terrain around the crash sites, search and rescue efforts have been delayed. And unfortunately, we do not expect that there are any survivors. And as I mentioned, I do want to reiterate that everything that I've talked about in this video has come from the internet and the news, which is prone to inaccuracies and speculation. And so to find out the truth of what actually happened, we still need to wait for official reports to come out. So guys, that is everything we know about the crash of China Eastern Flight 5735. Now, I know this is a pretty heavy topic that's pretty atypical for my channel, but it just felt a little weird for me to, talk about my normal plain content with lighthearted jokes. So I hope you still enjoyed it this time, but next week we will be back to our regularly scheduled programming. But if this was an informative video for you, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for new content. Now, lastly, I wanted to mention that during quarantine, I've been spending a lot of time on self-learning, and a great platform that I've been using to learn in a pretty enjoyable and interactive way is Brilliant. It's an interactive learning platform for all topics in STEM, from math and physics to computer science and logic. And best of all, courses on Brilliant are more than just throwing numbers and theory at your brain. Instead, they're more interactive, with models that help you visualize concepts and also quizzes to give you that extra sense of accomplishment too. And if you're curious about where to get started, I'd recommend their scientific thinking course, which is an awesome crash course for a variety of topics in science. To learn more about Brilliant, go to brilliant.org/Jenny Ma and you can try it out completely free. And if you like what you see, they're kindly offering a 20% discount off their annual plan for our viewers as well. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.